Clara Wynne had never heard of Velmora. The name alone sounded like something from an old, brittle storybook, too elegant to be real, too strange to be on any map. When the letter arrived yellowed, wax sealed, and oddly warm to the touch, it carried no return address. The envelope had no postage stamp, yet it sat neatly on top of her mail stack, one morning in a shared Boston apartment, tucked between a utility bill and a flyer for Thai takeout. Inside, the message was handwritten in neat, curling script to Clara Wynne. You are hereby notified of your inheritance of the property located at 3 Black Hollow Lane, Velmora. As sole heir of the late Dorothea Wynne, you are entitled to full claim and transfer of the estate. We strongly recommend you arrive before the next moonless night. Office of Local Records, Velmora Municipal Custody. There was no phone number, no signature, just that. Clara blinked at the name, Dorothea Wynne. She'd never heard it before. Her parents were both only children. She was certain of it. Her mother, dead for 5 years, had been closed off about family history, but not secretive. Clara would have remembered a name like Dorothea. She called the city clerk's office. No such town listed in the Massachusetts or Vermont registries. Google returned nothing. She scoured the dark corners of internet message boards. One post, written in 2007 and never responded to, simply said, "Anyone ever hear of a place called Velmora? Roads vanish near it. I left my brother's funeral with my uncle. He never made it back. I think the forest took him. It should have ended there. It should have been a hoax, a prank, a scam." But when Clara placed the letter down, her skin tingled. A slow, burning pressure crawled up her wrists like unseen cuffs. Something inside her whispered, "Go." 2 weeks later, she did. The bus dropped her at a nameless turn-off 5 hours from Boston. The driver, an older man with hollow eyes, handed her a folded slip before she stepped off. "You'll walk 2 miles down the gravel path. Don't leave it," he said. "And when you get there, don't ask questions unless you already know the answers." She looked down at the paper, a hand-drawn map, ink-smudged and tear-stained. "Who gave you this?" Clara asked. But the door hissed shut, and the bus drove away. She stood there, backpack slung over her shoulder, suitcase wheeling behind her like an obedient pet. Mist slithered across the road. Beyond the tree line, tall pines swayed with a sound that wasn't quite wind. Clara walked. The first sight of Velmora came like a dream half remembered. The rooftops peeking through fog, the glint of rusted iron fences, the scent of lavender and decay in the air. Everything looked still, not abandoned, maintained, but aged, as if the town were embalmed in time. At the town's edge, a carved wooden sign read, "Velmora," and beneath it, burned into the wood, "You are seen. Be still, be silent, charming," Clara thought grimly. She stepped beneath the sign, and the mist seemed to shift behind her, sealing off the path she'd taken. She arrived at 3 Black Hollow Lane, just as dusk painted the sky in bruised purples and copper. The house was large, Victorian, with 3 floors and the tower on the left side. Blackened ivy curled up its walls like veins. One shutter hung loose, swaying slightly, though the air was still. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old wood and dried lavender. A staircase curved up into shadow. Portraits lined the whole, faces long since faded, but all bearing striking features like her own: sharp brows, storm grey eyes, a certain curl to the lips. Her blood stirred in strange recognition. The sitting room held a fireplace where cold ash slept, a dusty piano, a cracked mirror. But what caught her attention was the letter sitting on a side table, untouched by dust. It read, "Welcome, Clara. The house remembers you. Your role is waiting. Do not fear the whispers. Follow the laws, and you may yet leave whole." There was no signature. Something creaked above her. Clara looked up, heart tightening. The stairs beckoned. She explored the house in dim light. Guided by the occasional candle, she found unlit ensconces on the walls. Most rooms were bare furniture, covered in sheets. Floors walked from years of quiet. But the attic door was slightly ajar. Something was scrawled across it in charcoal. Rule 2 must not break again. Clara opened the door slowly. Dust bloomed in clouds. The attic was cluttered with covered shapes, but near the far wall, something was uncovered, a low writing desk and a cracked window. Beneath it, clawed into the wood, were words written not in pen, but scratched deep by something sharp. Don't see them after dusk. It's Rule 2, she stared. Them, as if in answer, a low creaking echoed behind her. She spun, nothing. But from the window, she saw the fall parting in the street below. 3 figures stood there, still as statues, watching the house, watching her, and though the window was shut, a whisper rose, crawling inside her ears. Rule 2 is broken. She slammed the window shut and backed away. Her phone had no signal, no GPS, and the town outside had gone completely, unnaturally silent. That night, she dreamed of eyes, dozens, hundreds, watching from walls, ceilings, behind mirrors, and a voice raspy, genderless, repeating a list of rules she couldn't remember when she woke. Morning light brought little relief. The town was back in motion, but not alive. People walked with purpose, eyes down, voices hushed. When she approached an older woman sweeping her porch and asked about Dorothea, the woman just muttered, "Keep your questions quiet, girl. The law don't like noise." Another whisper, another warning. And everywhere Clara went, people glanced behind her. Not at her, behind her. By the 3rd day, Clara stopped asking questions. She started listening instead, because at night, the house whispered back. She heard it in the pipes, the floorboards. The wind through keyholes, words she almost understood, warnings, names, rules. She began writing them down. Not in her phone, not on paper. It burned once when she tried. Ink turned to vapor, pencils cracked. But she found an old ledger in the attic desk. Its pages were brittle but waiting. And in that book, with a rusted quill and ink that appeared from nowhere, she wrote her first words. Rule 1. You do not ask why. Rule 2. You do not see them after dusk. The quill moved by itself for a moment, underlining the second rule with a shaking hand. She slept with the book under her pillow. She didn't dream. 1 week into her stay, she awoke to find her door locked from the outside. A note was slid under it. You broke Rule 2. The custodian will come. Outside her window, fall pressed against the glass like breath. Inside, the house felt colder, not just in temperature, in presence. And just before midnight, someone knocked on the attic door upstairs. Once, twice, then silence. But Clara wasn't asleep. She sat on the floor, back to the wall, clutching the ledger. She had broken Rule 2. And now, she would learn what that meant. The knock never came again. Clara sat through the night, eyes wide in the dark, the leather-bound ledger pressed tight against her chest like a shield. The candle she'd lit hours earlier had long since drowned in its own wax. Shadows climbed the walls and curled in the corners like waiting things. When morning light finally peeled through the fog, she stumbled to her feet, legs numb and joints aching. She opened the door. It wasn't locked anymore. No sign of who had secured it. No footprints. Just a chill in the hallway, like breath exhaled from something cold and massive. Downstairs, the front door creaked open with a tug. The mist had lightened, but it still clung to the streets, the way wet cobwebs cling to stone. Velmora was awake again, but just barely. People drifted by like leaves in a current. A few glanced at her. Most didn't. She walked to the only public building she'd seen that looked alive, the Velmora Municipal Custody. The name etched into stone above a door of green-black iron. Inside was darker than she expected. A single oil lamp flickered behind the front desk, and behind it sat a woman with waxy skin and pinched lips. She didn't look up when Clara stepped in. "Excuse me," Clara said. The woman didn't move. She simply spoke. "You've already been recorded." Clara frowned. "What? Your arrival? The law saw it. You're under account now. Look, I don't know what kind of town this is. The woman's eyes lifted at last, and Clara's voice dried up. Her irises were pale grey, the whites yellowing. But what froze Clara wasn't their strange colour. It was that they didn't reflect any light. You've broken rule 2, the woman said. He will see you soon. Who? Clara whispered. The woman didn't answer. She looked back down at her desk. Clara stepped closer, and that's when she saw the ledger. Another one, just like hers. The book opened itself. A quill hovered over the page. Clara watched in mute horror as it wrote, Win, Clara, Rule 2. Violation logged. Rule 4 proximity risk, pending. Before she could speak, the woman reached up, pressed her finger to her own lips. The law does not enjoy noise, she said, especially when it writes. Clara left the building shaking. As she walked, whispers followed her soft, indistinct murmurs, always from just behind her left ear. She spun more than once, only to see empty windows, dead grass, the faint movement of curtains. She ducked into a shop, a kind of apothecary, cluttered with dried herbs and bottles filled with black liquids. The bell above the door didn't ring. The man behind the counter looked up slowly. He was blindfolded. You should cover your ears at dusk, he said before she even spoke. They follow sound. That's how they remember who saw them. I don't understand, Clara whispered. None of this makes sense. What is the law? Who writes it? Why can't I leave this town? You came by inheritance, he said. Blood brings you. Blood keeps you. You can't leave unless you never belonged. He turned to a shelf, pulled a tiny vial of ash-colored powder. For Rule 2. Keep the voices out. I didn't bring money, Clara muttered. The man smiled. His teeth were sharp. You've already paid. That evening, Clara sat in her room, the windows covered with heavy drapes, the corners lined with salt she found in the cellar. She poured the powder from the apothecary in a circle around her bed. As night fell, she pressed cloth into her ears, hugged the ledger to her chest, and lay still, but silence didn't help. The voices came anyway. Clara, Win, child of breach, of rule, of bloodline. You see us still. We're in your memory. That's enough. A shape moved under her bed. Or perhaps it was inside the wall. You cannot unsee the law. You can only obey. She screamed without sound, clawed at her ears, and the whispering stopped all at once as if a needle had lifted from an invisible record. And then, for the first time, she heard footsteps in the hall. Someone stopped outside her door. A folded note slid under it. She waited a full minute before touching it. It said, Violation acknowledged. Auditor remark noted. Custodian Thorne will assess at dawn. Clara didn't sleep. At first light, she opened the door and descended the stairs. Waiting in her sitting room was a man in a black suit, tall and rigid, his face unreadable beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His hands were gloved, and his voice, when he spoke, came not from his mouth, but from everywhere in the room. You are Clara Win, he said. She nodded. You have broken the second law. Do you acknowledge the breach? I didn't know the rules, she said. That is not the same as obedience, the custodian said. The law is not written for a convenience. It is etched into place, old, unchanging. You've been marked. Then why am I still here? She asked, defiant. Because the law does not kill. It rewrites. He approached her, and as he passed the mirror, Clara saw that his reflection didn't follow. Instead, it stood still smiling. He handed her a black feather. Place this beneath your pillow each night. The law will test your memory. You must remember only the correct version. Clara's mouth opened. The correct version of what? He vanished. That night, she dreamt of her mother. But it wasn't her mother. It wore her mother's face, said her mother's words. Yet when she awoke, she couldn't remember what her real mother looked like. Her photographs were gone. Her memories fogged. Her name, her voice, blurred. The law was rewriting. Clara wrote frantically in the ledger. Rule 3. Do not trust dreams. Rule 4. Memories are subject to audit. The words burned into the page like brands. She looked in the mirror. She couldn't remember her own middle name. Velmora was closing in. And the law was only just beginning. The feather vanished. Clara had placed it under her pillow as instructed. But come morning, it was gone, no trace, no disturbance. The air in her room felt heavier, like a library buried underground. Her dreams were muddled, stitched from half memories and fragments of lore she'd never learned. Names she didn't recognize repeated themselves in her mind. Thorn, Wynne, Elia, Bryn, Cordova. The ledger sat beside her bed, open to a blank page, the ink bottle mysteriously full again. She wrote in it quickly, Rule 5. The custodian takes only what you don't know you need. Downstairs, the sitting room was colder than usual. The fireplace had lit itself. On the mantel sat a clock she had never seen before. Its hands ticked backward. A knock came at the front door. No sound of approach. Just one knock, then silence. She opened it. Mr. Thorne stood outside, looking exactly as he had before. His hat cast a deep shadow over his face. May I come in? You don't need permission, Clara said. Do you? The custodian stepped over the threshold. His gloved hands never moved. He took a seat in the same armchair her mother used to sit in. At least, she thought it was her mother. The image in her head was growing hazy. You'll begin your apprenticeship today, he said. Clara blinked. Apprenticeship? You were blood-marked, Thorne said. Born of the line that once preserved the Ledger House. The last custodian in your line failed. The law does not abide gaps. You have been summoned to restore balance. I didn't agree to anything. You did, he said. The moment you opened the letter, Clara felt her stomach churn. What does being a custodian mean? She asked. You'll record violations. Interpret the law. Enforce it when necessary. I don't know the law. No one does, not all of it. That is why we listen. He reached into his coat and withdrew a leather-bound book, older than hers. Its cover was etched with 9 lines, 8 intact, 1 crossed through with blood. This is the High Ledger, he said. It contains all known rulings. You will copy them by hand into your own book, but understand, each time you write, the law may test you. She touched the cover. Her fingers burned. You will begin tonight, he said. You must also watch the town. They will break the law again. They always do. He stood and walked to the door. Wait, Clara said. What happens if I refuse? Thorne turned. His eyes, pale and endless, met hers. Then you will be written out. That afternoon, Clara began reading. The High Ledger was not in English, not entirely. The text shifted on the page, shaped itself to her mind. Some entries were legible, others blurred, pulsing with black ink that dripped without falling. Rule 6. No name shall be spoken of the Hollowburn. Rule 7. Laughter after dusk is mockery. Rule 8. Do not observe the law's reflection. Each entry had a record beneath it, names, punishments, warnings. Some were scratched out entirely. One page was covered in ash. Another had no ink, but was still readable to her mind. Clara's hand shook as she began copying them into her own book. With each rule, a part of her body ached, her ribs, her spine, her fingertips. The room dimmed slightly. She noticed, out the corner of her eye, that shadows gathered when she copied Rule 7, and when she wrote Rule 8, a reflection turned to look at her before she did. That night, she patrolled the town. The custodian had left a map of zones of concern: Black Hollow Lane, the Mourner's Gate, the Cemetery Hill, the old schoolhouse. She walked slowly, feeling the town breathe around her. The mist parted for her now, doors stayed closed. But near the edge of the cemetery, she heard a child's laughter. Her blood turned cold. It was after dusk. She found the source, a girl, maybe 7, playing near the gravestones, alone. Hey, Clara called. You can't. The girl looked at her. Her eyes were completely black. I didn't laugh, the girl whispered. I remembered. Something moved behind the gravestones. A flicker of shape. Clara blinked, and it was gone. The girl was gone too, but on the grave beside her, someone had carved, violation. Rule 7. Mockery is memory. When Clara returned home, her ledger was open. New entries had appeared without her hand. Subject: Clara Wynne. Observation: initiation begins. Compliance: conditional, memory, weakening. And beneath it, the 9th rule remains unwritten. Beware the writing. Clara stared at the page. Then she wrote, Rule 9. Intentionally left blank, the ink didn't dry. It bled across the page like an open wound. And from behind her, the mirror whispered, some laws aren't passed, they're whispered. The village bell rang once. It wasn't a loud toll, it sounded more like a bone dropped into water. But it echoed through Clara's bones and woke her like a slap. Morning had barely stretched over Velmora, yet the streets already murmured with dread. She opened her window and looked out over the square. A procession was forming, silent, purposeful. Hooded townsfolk walked toward the chapel with heads bowed and hands clasped tightly over their mouths. Clara dressed quickly, grabbed her ledger, and followed. The chapel was a crumbling stone building wrapped in ivy. Its windows were covered with thick black fabric. The villagers entered one by one. And when Clara tried to follow, a hand stopped her. It was Thorn. Not you. Not yet. What is this? She asked, a remembering. A breach of Rule 5. Clara furrowed her brow. What is Rule 5? Thorn didn't answer. Instead, he placed something into her hand. A photograph, sepia-toned, torn at the edges. It showed a woman standing near a well, face blurred as if time had rejected her features. On the back, in trembling cursive, was written, Elia Cordova. Do not say her name. Clara's fingers trembled. You just did, she whispered. No, Thorn said. You did. And the chapel doors slammed shut behind him. She returned home and opened the ledger. To her surprise, it had already recorded something. Rule 5. You must not speak the names of the lost. Violation confirmed. Elia Cordova, witness, Clara Wynne. The ink writhed on the page. I didn't mean to. Clara whispered. From the corner of the room, the fireplace flared. The law knows intent. It punishes the known and the spoken. That night, Clara dreamt of a well. It stood in a field of snow, unmoving. A rope swung above it with a bell at the end. A voice from below called to her. Do you remember me? She woke gasping, hand clutching. Her throat, her bed sheets were soaked. On the wall above her bed, the name Elia had been scratched in charcoal, dozens of times. She didn't remember doing it. At breakfast, the town was silent. Children didn't play. Shops didn't open. Even the crows perched on lampposts stared in unison. UNMOVING. She found the apothecary again. The blindfolded man was waiting. She called out, he said. You heard her. The law heard you. I didn't know. Clara said. How was I supposed to know? You inherited a house of memory, he said. The law assumes knowledge. Ignorance is not a defense. He handed her a vial, lavender and salt, he said. Place it around your door. If she knocks, do not open. Clara returned home. She poured the mixture. The house groaned as if displeased. Then she heard it. A knock. 3 taps. Delicate. Familiar. Elia. Clara whispered. The air chilled. The vial shattered on the floor. The knocking became pounding. She screamed, backed away, tripped over the rug. Silence. Then a whisper from under the door. You remembered me. That's enough. That night, she dreamt of walking into the well. She climbed down rope made of her own hair. Below, a courtroom waited. Empty seats. A judge with no face. A voice called out. The witness cannot forget what is named. She woke with a name carved into her arm. Elia Cordova's ledger had absorbed it, ink etched in crimson. Memorialization has occurred. Subject marked for memory. Await ruling. The next day, Thorn returned. She's attached now, he said. You must do the cleansing. I can't, Clara cried. She was a person. She still is, Thorn said. But not only. He handed her a page torn from the high ledger. On it, procedure. Erasure of memorialized entity. Requirement: silence, fire, salt. A name must be given, then forgotten. Clara performed the right dot. She whispered the name into the fire. She spread salt on the coals. She covered her ears. She forgot. The next morning, her wall was clean, but her reflection had one eye missing, and the ledger said, erasure incomplete, memory suppressed, Rule 5 upheld, subject stability, marginal, asterisk. Rain began falling in reverse. Clara stood at her window and watched droplets crawl back into the sky. Each one carried a glint of red, like tiny mirrors filled with blood. The village square shimmered unnaturally, refracted through the glass of a world turning inside out. She turned to the ledger. Its page had already flipped itself open. Rule 7. Never jest about the law. Words mock the roots that bind. Violation observed. Marcus Velin. Witnesses, 23. Toll imposed. No one knew who Marcus was until the toll collector arrived. He came without shoes, his feet cracked and trailing a black slime that burned through stone. A bell hung from his throat, not on a string, but sewn into the flesh. It chimed with each breath he took, a chime no one could hear but Clara. Her ears bled at every ring. The collector didn't knock. He stood in the square and waited. Someone pushed a boy out of a home. Then a woman, then another man. No one knew who Marcus was, but the collector did. He stared at each face until one blinked wrong. Then he moved. The man he chose screamed, but not from pain. He screamed from realization. I was joking, he cried. I said the law had holes. I didn't know. The collector covered his mouth with both hands. The man convulsed. His laughter came next. Horrible, mad, high-pitched. He laughed as he clawed his own chest open. Clara watched from behind her curtain, trembling. Thorne found her that evening. He was the toll, Thorne said. I thought he was Marcus. Thorne nodded. Same thing. The law doesn't distinguish, mockery breeds. Debt. The toll is the debt made flesh. Then why are you telling me this? Clara asked. Why do you keep explaining things to me? Because you're next. Clara stared at him. You were heard laughing, Thorne said. I wasn't laughing. The law thinks you were. She ran to the apothecary. This time, the man behind the curtain was not blindfolded. His eyes were wide, terrified. The toll came here, he said. What do I do? You wait for nightfall. You hang 2 mirrors, back to back, above your door. And you sleep with wax in your ears. That's it. If the toll visits, you must not react. It only knows it exists if you acknowledge it. That night, Clara followed his instructions. The air grew heavy at midnight. Her house groaned like it was under deep water. Then came the knock. One soft knock. Then 2. Then the sound of laughter, but not human. It was echoing, metallic, like a child's wind-up, toy breaking mid-chime. She stayed in bed, eyes wide, ears packed with wax, but inside her skull, the laughter vibrated. She bit her tongue to avoid smiling. When dawn came, she removed the wax. The mirrors were gone, melted. The floor was scorched, but she was alive. The ledger, however, had changed. Debt deferred, not erased. Mockery haunts. She looked in the mirror. Her reflection wasn't smiling. It was weeping. The next day, the village square held a tribunal. The judge had no mouth. A line of villagers stood before it. Each was accused of violating Rule 7. Each begged forgiveness. Each was granted silence. Not freedom. Just silence. Their mouths disappeared. Their tongues vanished. Their thoughts became static. Only Clara was spared, because the toll had touched her house. She was marked, pending. Laugh again, and it becomes law. She said nothing. She did not sleep that night, but from the far end of her room, her reflection watched her, eyes gleaming, mouth twitching, almost smiling. Asterisk. The ledger bled. Clara awoke to a sharp smell of iron and rot. The book lay open on her bedside table. Pages soaked in crimson ink, or was it blood? It pulsed with heat. Rule 9. When the ledger opens by itself, something must be written. Even a lie, failure to comply leads to overwrite, identity corruption. She reached for a pen. Her hands trembled, knuckles white. She didn't understand what to write. A name, a story, a confession. The room twisted. The corners bent away from logic. Books flew from the shelves. Her teacup shattered in reverse. A voice whispered from the pages, hers, but older, meaner, write something. Now, before the law, write you instead. She wrote the first thing that came to mind. I'm not Clara. The book hummed. For a moment, everything froze. Then it accepted the lie. When Clara looked in the mirror, she saw someone else. The reflection blinked wrong. It turned its head before she moved. At the village square. No one recognized her. Not even Thorn. Who are you? He asked. She tried to explain. The words came out as ash. The law had overwritten her. She ran to the forest. The trees there whispered. The ledger never forgets. But it can be rewritten. With sacrifice. Someone must take your name. Someone must forget theirs. She wandered 4 hours, days, until she found a child. The boy had no eyes, no mouth, no past, a blank. She knelt and whispered, "Your name is Clara." He blinked. He became. She faded. The real Clara felt her skin tighten, her bones shift, her voice return, but walked different. She was no longer herself, but she was no longer nothing. She returned to the village. The townspeople nodded at her. Unsure. The ledger appeared in her arms again. Open, Rule 10. Sacrifice binds the law, but never twice. Repeat attempts will unravel the spine. She didn't understand what it meant, until the sky cracked, a tear, long and jagged. Like the world's paper skin had split. From it, the archivist descended, a creature made of books and blades, robes, stitched from laws. Its face a torn scroll. It floated. It read from her lie. I am not Clara. Violation noted. False record integrated. Ledger unstable. Clara dropped to her knees. Please, she whispered. The archivist placed one inky finger on her forehead. Everything she ever remembered vanished. She awoke in the apothecary. He looked at her with both kindness and terror. You've broken the spine, he whispered. You wrote yourself into a contradiction. I don't know who I am, she said. That's why it left you alive, outside. The sky remained torn. The village buzzed with unread pages and undone thoughts. Every door had a rule carved into it. Every mirror showed a different face. Every person was becoming someone else. Clara opened the ledger one last time. There were no more rules, only a line. This book ends when no one remembers how it began. She stared at it for a long time. Then she closed the book and burned it. The village no longer whispered, it screamed. Clara stood in the center of the square, surrounded by shifting architecture and people who bled through timelines. Children, aged backward. Elders flickered like broken film reels. Laws danced in the air like spectral insects, rewritten in languages no one remembered creating. The apothecary was gone, replaced by a library that breathed. Clara pushed open its oak doors. Inside, thousands of books hovered, murmuring their contents. A grand desk stood in the middle, and behind it sat a boy with no eyes, the one she had named Clara. Welcome, he said, voice like a chorus of forgotten things. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. You made me, he said. He gestured to the largest book, bound in skin and wax. The final law waits to be unsealed, but it can only be read by one who has broken every previous rule. Clara's hands burned as they touched the cover. It pulsed with memories not all hers, lives she'd overwritten, names she'd buried. She opened the book, Final Law. The one who knows the truth must write the ending. Her pen hovered. I don't know the truth, she whispered. Then lie, the boy said. She wrote. The law was always meant to be broken. The library shook. Shelves crumbled into dust. Books screamed. The boy with no eyes laughed and split into light. The roof peeled away, and from the skies descended not one archivist, but many. Hundreds. Thousands. Each with scroll faces and bone quills, wings stitched from contracts, eyes burning with ink. They formed a circle around Clara. 1, Stepped forward. Violation complete. Initiate collapse. The world turned inside out. She found herself in the woods again. But not the same. These trees were concepts. Leaves fluttered like paper. Roots whispered obsolete laws. In the center of the forest stood a mirror. In it, she saw every version of herself: child, thief, scribe, liar, ghost. They stared back, waiting. One stepped out. "I am you," it said. "But unbound. What are you?" Clara asked. "I'm the ending you haven't written yet." It placed a hand on her chest. Words erupted from her skin, floating like ash. Unseen law. There must always be a witness. The reflection vanished, and Clara stood alone. She returned to the village, but now it was a void. The people were gone. Time stopped. The air held only potential. At the center, the ledger. Rewritten. Empty. She opened it. Author: Clara. The question mark burned. She pressed her finger to the page. Yes. Ink bled across the paper. Buildings rose. People reformed. Rules re-engraved into doors, but now fluid, forgiving. The archivists hovered above, unreadable. Then, one by one, they closed their books and vanished. All except one. It approached Clara. Gently. And handed her the quill. "You write the next law," she smiled. "There will be none, only choices." The archivist bowed. And left. The ledger closed for the final time. Clara walked into a world she had remade. No rules. Only whispers of what had been. Only echoes of the unseen. The village no longer whispered, it screamed. Clara stood in the center of the square, surrounded by shifting architecture and people who bled through timelines. Children aged backward. Elders flickered like broken film reels. Laws danced in the air like spectral insects, rewritten in languages no one remembered creating. The apothecary was gone, replaced by a library that breathed. Clara pushed open its oak doors. Inside, thousands of books hovered, murmuring their contents. A grand desk stood in the middle, and behind it sat a boy with no eyes, the one she had named Clara. "Welcome," he said, voice like a chorus of forgotten things. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "You made me," he said. He gestured to the largest book, bound in skin and wax. The final law waits to be unsealed, but it can only be read by one who has broken every previous rule. Clara's hands burned as they touched the cover. It pulsed with memories not all hers, lives she'd overwritten, names she'd buried. She opened the book. Final law. The one who knows the truth must write the ending. Her pen hovered. "I don't know the truth," she whispered. "Then lie," the boy said. She wrote. The law was always meant to be broken. The library shook. Shelves crumbled into dust. Books screamed. The boy with no eyes laughed and split into light. The roof peeled away, and from the skies descended not one archivist, but many. Hundreds. Thousands. Each with scroll faces and bone quills, wings stitched from contracts, eyes burning with ink. They formed a circle around Clara. One stepped forward. Violation complete. Initiate collapse. The world turned inside out. She found herself in the woods again. But not the same. These trees were concepts. Leaves fluttered like paper. Roots whispered obsolete laws. In the center of the forest stood a mirror. In it, she saw every version of herself: child, thief, scribe, liar, ghost. They stared back, waiting. One stepped out. "I am you," it said. "But unbound. What are you?" Clara asked. "I'm the ending you haven't written yet." It placed a hand on her chest. Words erupted from her skin, floating like ash. Unseen law. There must always be a witness. The reflection vanished, and Clara stood alone. She returned to the village, but now it was a void. The people were gone. Time stopped. The air held only potential. At the center, the ledger. Rewritten. Empty. She opened it. Author: Clara. The question mark burned. She pressed her finger to the page. Yes. Ink bled across the paper. Buildings rose. People reformed. Rules re-engraved into doors, but now fluid, forgiving. The archivists hovered above, unreadable. Then, one by one, they closed their books and vanished. all except one. It approached Clara. Gently. And handed her the quill. You write the next law. She smiled. There will be none. Only choices. The archivist bowed. And left. The ledger closed for the final time. Clara walked into a world she had remade. No rules. Only whispers of what had been. Only echoes of the unseen. The dying sun bled deep red into the horizon, casting the village of Velmora in hues of fire and shadow. The air was thick with the scent of moss and wet earth, carried on a wind that whispered like distant voices through the skeletal branches of ancient trees. Clara's footsteps were the only sound that broke the stillness as she walked alone across the square, each step stirring the dust of forgotten laws and lost memories. The ledger was tucked carefully beneath her arm, its leather cover worn and cracked, as if it to bore the weight of all the village's secrets. The book pulsed faintly against her side, alive with the echoes of every law broken and every truth hidden beneath the surface of this silent place. Velmora was no longer the village she had first arrived at. The faces she passed were changed, some blurred at the edges, others too sharp, as if caught between worlds. Their eyes held a strange stillness, like they were caught in a moment just before awakening or after a long sleep. But Clara felt their gaze, heavy and expectant, like the calm before a storm. Her breath caught as she reached the old well, the well from her dreams, the one that had called to her in the darkness. The cold stone rim was rough beneath her fingers, damp with the night's chill. She leaned close and peered down into the black depths, where water rippled softly, reflecting the dying light. From those depths came a voice, soft, broken, and unmistakably hers. You are the last. Clara's heart thundered. The voice was hers, but fractured, as if splintered across time and memory. It was the echo of every choice she had made, every rule she had broken, every moment she had tried to bend fate to her will. She stepped back from the well, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. The sun slipped lower, and shadows stretched like dark fingers across the ground. She opened the ledger carefully, fingers trembling. The pages were blank clean for the first time since she had taken it into her hands. The silence in the village was profound. No footsteps echoed behind her. No whispers chased her words. The archivists had vanished, taking with them the rigid laws that had bound Velmora for generations. The rules were undone, but the silence left behind was louder than any command. Clara's gaze drifted over the empty pages. Then, slowly, words began to appear, as if written by an invisible hand. Witness must always remain. Even when the law is undone, the tremor in her hand grew, but she took the quill and touched it lightly to the page. I am the last witness to what was, what is, and what might be. A sudden rumble shook the earth beneath her feet. The villagers appeared around the edges of the square, emerging from the shadows with eyes wide and unblinking. They did not speak, nor did they move closer. Instead, they waited patient, still, bearing the weight of countless stories unsaid. Clara's voice was barely a whisper as she lifted the quill again. Let the world remember, not rules, but stories. The sky above cracked open, revealing a shaft of warm, golden light that spilled down over Velmora. It was a light that forgave and healed, that washed away the cold fear and replaced it with a fragile hope. The ledger warmed in her hands, its pulse steadying as if content with her words. Slowly, the villagers began to breathe again. Their faces softened. They stepped forward, shedding the heavy silence that had cloaked them for so long. Children laughed quietly, elders smiled, and a breeze stirred the leaves in the ancient trees. Clara closed the ledger, the final sound of its clasp echoing through the air like a promise. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. The sun dipped below the horizon, and night fell gently over Velmora. The village was still, but alive with the stories carried in the hearts of its people. The laws may have been undone, but the legacy remained in whispers, in memories, in the choices that shaped every soul. Clara looked up at the stars emerging overhead, each one a flicker of light in the vast darkness. She understood now that the unseen law was never about control or punishment. It was about witnessing the delicate, balance between what is forgotten and what must be remembered, and she was the last witness, the final keeper of stories.